Thank you very much, Riz. This morning, earlier today, I filed the submission with the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. It's a submission that consists both of legal materials, which I developed for the Arab Organization for Human Rights in the UK, and a collection of factual material as well. It's about 40 pages in length. It includes many references to videos that are available about the factual issues, also to various documents on the Al-Aqsa mosque emanating from bodies like UNESCO and the United Nations General Assembly over a period of many years. And finally, it includes several eyewitness testimonies by victims. So we have the summaries of the accounts, but the full depositions that they prepared have also been submitted to the Office of the Prosecutor. What the situation at the court is as follows. The prosecutor is already working on an active investigation into the situation, what's called the situation in the state of Palestine. This is a procedural step that's an important one. The situation in the state of Palestine is one of about 15 active situations that the prosecutor is working on, according to his own reports and information. So this is not a submission asking the prosecutor to begin an investigation, but rather insisting that the prosecutor examine the situation of the Al-Aqsa Mosque within the broader context of the situation in Palestine as a whole. Until 2 years ago, it was possible to know to have at least an idea of what the prosecutor was examining, because there were reports that were filed regularly. But the prosecutor has become more taciturn in the new prosecutor, Karim Khan, about exactly what he's working on, and he is not really very talkative about Palestine in particular. The state of Palestine, made a submission to the International Criminal Court's Assembly of States Parties earlier this week. The Assembly of States Parties is the governing body. It meets every year for about a week and takes decisions on a range of issues, and this is when the prosecutor normally makes an annual report. States that are members of the court, like the state of Palestine, also often make statements. So the state of Palestine made a statement a few days ago in the Assembly of States Parties, protesting the fact that the situation in Palestine as a whole does not appear to be getting the attention that it should and that it warrants by the International Criminal Court, and that means by the prosecutor. So this is the situation that we're now confronting at the court. It's with Palestine at the International Criminal Court. It's been a case of one step forward and two steps back, or sometimes two steps forward and one step back. A big step forward was taken last year when the decision was taken to begin the investigation. But in fact, or a year and a half ago, I should say, when the decision was taken. But there has not been any visible progress in the investigation over the last year. So the material that I think we have brought to the investigation is extremely important, because it deals with a facet of the whole spectrum of international crimes that has in the past received considerable attention from the Office of the Prosecutor and the court in general in other situations. For example, there was and continues to be considerable amount of activity with regard to the damage to religious buildings and attacks on religious observance in the state of Mali, dating from a period in 2012, when in the context of a civil conflict. So there's not a shortage of material from the prosecutor indicating an interest in dealing with this type of issue under the heading of crimes against humanity. And so these examples are brought out. They will demonstrate, I think, to the global public that there's nothing obscure or unusual about the court focusing its attention on attacks on religious buildings, on holy sites, and on those who worship at those holy sites. And what this submission does, amongst other things, is highlight the fact that the court should, in order to really demonstrate that it's not a court of double standards, treat these violations and abuses that are taking place in Jerusalem with regard to the holy sites in the same way that it's done with others. So this is ultimately the substance of the report. As I say, it's not to convince the prosecutor to begin the general investigation, because that's already has already been taken. That step has been taken. But it is important, I think, to signal that we are in a challenging period, not just about the Al-Aqsa Mosque at the International Criminal Court, but more generally about getting the attention of the new prosecutor I say new, he's been a prosecutor at the International Criminal Court for something more than a year, and he's well known to those of us in legal circles in the United Kingdom, because he's a King's Counsel and a member of the bar of here in London. I'll stop there, Riz. I'm quite happy to answer questions. If
Thanks, William. Well, yeah, can I just ask one very brief follow-up question before we move on for a moment? And what one often sees in cases that are brought before the ICC, not always, but from time to time, is that there's a degree of legal novelty that's deployed in order to bring a matter within the ICC's jurisdiction. But I think what you're really saying is that there's nothing novel about the approach that you've adopted, because it's being used elsewhere. This is a question of really whether or not there's the will to bring it into the current investigation.
That's correct. That's correct. This is ground that's familiar to the prosecutor, and I think it was important in the submission to remind him of that, and also to point out because there is always a tendency, as you say, of people to think that perhaps there are some challenging legal issues that make it difficult to proceed. But this is one that is not only not challenging from a legal standpoint, but the violations and abuses are going on in plain sight, and the evidence of them is accessible. It's available on film, and those who are responsible for it are also quite brazen in the statements and the activities that they undertake. If they had studied the case law of the International Criminal Court, they would know that they are on thin ice in terms of what they're doing and their vulnerability to be charged. And I'm speaking both about those within the state of Israel, the officials who are condoning the behavior or inciting it or encouraging it, but also the private individuals and groups who are engaging in the various provocations and attacks that they are. It's important that they all know that even if we don't have a clear manifestation of the will of the prosecutor to proceed, that they are exposing themselves quite openly to vulnerability to prosecution for these crimes at the international level.